When Michael Jordan walked into his old high school classroom after 35 years, his teacher Eleanor Hartwell couldn't believe her eyes. The greatest basketball player of all time was standing right there, in the same room where he once struggled as a skinny 15-year-old kid who'd just been cut from the varsity team. But Michael wasn't there to talk about basketball. He wasn't there to sign autographs or take pictures. He was there to say thank you for something his teacher did back in 1979 that she didn't even remember doing. Something so small, so simple, that she never thought twice about it. Michael walked up to her desk and placed a small wrapped box among her papers. "Don't open it until I leave," he said quietly. "But first, I need to tell you a story. A story about why I'm really here. What could possibly be inside that mysterious box? Why did Michael Jordan travel all this way to see a teacher he hadn't spoken to in over 3 decades? And what did she do that was so important it changed not just his life, but the lives of thousands of children she'd never even met? The answer will shock you and might even make you cry. Because this isn't just a story about basketball or fame or success. It's a story about sandwiches, red ink, and how one small act of kindness can ripple across 40 years and change the world. Stay with us until the end to find out what was in that box and why it made a 67-year-old retired teacher break down in tears. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. This is the incredible true story of how Eleanor Hartwell discovered that her entire life's work wasn't wasted after all. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October 2019. Eleanor sat alone in room 207 of Laney High School in Wilmington, North Carolina, grading papers just like she'd done for the past 42 years. The fluorescent lights flickered above her head. Rain pounded against the windows, and she had no idea that in just a few minutes, everything she thought she knew about her life was about to change forever. The fluorescent lights in room 207 flickered with their usual tired rhythm, casting Eleanor Hartwell's desk in alternating shadows and pale yellow light. Outside, October rain drummed against the tall windows of Laney High School, turning the afternoon into something gray and heavy. Eleanor barely noticed. After 42 years of teaching English in this same building, she'd long stopped paying attention to flickering lights and autumn storms. She hunched over a stack of essays, her red pen moving across a student's paper with practiced efficiency. The handwriting was sloppy, the grammar atrocious, but she could see the kernel of something real buried in the words. That's what kept her going. Even now, just 2 months from retirement, those kernels, those tiny sparks of authentic voice trying to break through years of students being told to write what teachers wanted to hear instead of what they actually felt. Eleanor circled a particularly awkward sentence and wrote in the margin, "What are you really trying to say here? Don't hide behind big words. Tell me the truth." She was 67 years old. Her fingers ached from arthritis, and her back protested every time she stood up from this worn wooden chair. But she still believed in those kernels. She still believed one honest sentence could change a young person's life. The classroom was empty except for her. Most teachers fled the building the moment the final bell rang at 2:45, but Eleanor often stayed until 5 or 6, grading papers, organizing lesson plans, or simply sitting in the quiet sanctuary of her room. This space had been hers since 1977, the same desk, scarred with decades of pencil marks and coffee rings. The same chalkboard, now converted to a whiteboard she'd never quite mastered. The same view of the football field and parking lot where generations of students had laughed, cried, fought, kissed, and grown up. In December, someone else would sit at this desk. Someone else would inherit these walls covered with literary quotes and student artwork. Someone else would try to convince 16-year-olds that writing mattered, that finding their authentic voice mattered, that showing up and doing the work of becoming themselves mattered. Eleanor wasn't sure any of it had mattered at all. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She looked up, expecting the janitor or perhaps another teacher stopping by. Instead, the door opened slowly, and a tall figure stepped inside. A man wearing a simple black coat and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked, setting down her pen. Visitors were rare at this hour. The man closed the door gently behind him and took a few steps into the classroom. He moved with an athlete's grace, deliberate and smooth. When he reached the center of the room, beneath the flickering fluorescent lights, he removed his baseball cap. Eleanor's red pen clattered to the desk. She knew that face. Everyone in America knew that face. The strong jaw, the famous smile, the eyes that had stared down opponents in championships around the world. But it couldn't be. It made no sense. "Mrs. Hartwell," Michael Jordan said softly, that legendary smile spreading across his features. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Her hand went to her throat. She tried to speak, but no words came. She pushed herself up from the chair, her legs unsteady, her mind reeling through possibilities. Was this real? Was she having some kind of stress-induced hallucination brought on by grading too many papers? "Michael," she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, ma'am." He walked toward her desk, and she could see he was real, the slight silver in his hair, the fine lines around his eyes, the solid physical presence of him. It's been a long time. 35 years. More, maybe. She'd had him in her 10th grade English class in 1978. He'd been a skinny sophomore, polite but unremarkable, struggling with essays and grammar like most of his classmates. She remembered him, of course. Everyone remembered having Michael Jordan in their class once he became Michael Jordan. But they hadn't spoken in decades, not since he'd graduated and gone on to become the man standing in front of her now. "I don't understand," Eleanor said, steadying herself against the desk. "What are you doing here?" Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box, wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with string. He walked to her desk and placed it carefully among the scattered essays and textbooks, his large hands gentle with the package. "I came to say thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion she didn't understand. "And to leave you something." Eleanor stared at the box, then back at him, completely bewildered. "But I need to ask you for one favor first," Michael continued, pulling a student's chair away from one of the desks. He sat down, looking suddenly vulnerable in the too small plastic seat. "Don't open it until I leave. Will you promise me that?" She nodded slowly, unable to process what was happening. Her eyes kept drifting to the mysterious box on her desk. What could Michael Jordan possibly need to give her? And why now, after all these years? "I promise," she whispered. "Good." Michael took a deep breath and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "There's a story I need to tell you first, Mrs. Hartwell, about why I'm really here, about what you did for me that you don't even remember, and about what's in that box." Eleanor sank back into her chair, her heart pounding, her mind spinning with questions. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. And in room 207, where she'd spent 42 years wondering if any of it mattered, Michael Jordan sat in a student's chair and prepared to tell her a story that would change everything she thought she knew about her life's work. "It starts in September 1978, he said quietly. "The first day of your English class. Do you remember?" Eleanor shook her head, tears already forming in her eyes, though she didn't know why. "I do," Michael said. "I remember everything." Eleanor watched him, this giant of a man folded into a child's chair, and tried to reconcile him with the 15-year-old boy she'd taught so long ago. The details were fuzzy now, buried under thousands of other students, other faces, other names. September 1978, Michael continued, his eyes distant with memory. I was 15 years old, skinny, awkward. My older brother Larry was the star of everything: basketball, school, life. I was just Michael, trying to figure out where I fit. Basketball was okay for me, but I wasn't special, not yet. And school? He laughed without humor. School was a nightmare. Eleanor leaned forward, drawn into his words despite her confusion. Your class was third period, Michael said, right after gym. I'd show up sweaty and tired, trying to stay awake while you talked about metaphors and thesis statements. Most of it went right over my head. I was pulling C's and D's in almost everything. My parents were worried. The guidance counselor suggested maybe I wasn't college material. Maybe I should think about trade school. He paused, his jaw tightening at the memory. Then you gave us an assignment, first week of class. Write about someone you admire and why. 500 words minimum. I remember you standing at the front of the room saying, I don't want fluff. I don't want what you think I want to hear. I want the truth about why this person matters to you. Eleanor did remember that assignment. She'd given it every year, the first week of school. It was her way of hearing her students' voices, understanding who they were beneath the teenage bravado and insecurity. I went home that night and stared at a blank page for 3 hours, Michael said. Everyone else in class was writing about Muhammad Ali or their parents or Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't know who I admired. I didn't even know who I was, so how could I know who I wanted to be like? The rain outside had intensified, hammering against the windows in waves. Eleanor pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The assignment was due on Friday. By Thursday night, I still had nothing. I was panicking. So I did what every scared kid does. I lied. I wrote about my father, James Jordan. I said he was my hero because he worked hard and provided for our family and taught me about integrity. All true things, but Michael's voice dropped. They weren't my truths. They were just words I thought a teacher would want to read. Safe words. Empty words. I turned it in on Friday, he continued. Half a page of nothing dressed up to look like something. And you know what you gave me? Eleanor shook her head. A C-. Michael smiled at the memory. I was relieved. I'd avoided an F. But then, as class was ending, you asked me to stay behind. Everyone else filed out. And I stood there by your desk thinking I was about to get lectured about my handwriting, or my grammar, or something. Eleanor felt a flutter of recognition. She'd had hundreds of those conversations over the years. But that's not what happened, Michael said, his voice growing softer. You looked at me, really looked at me, and you said something I didn't understand at the time. You said, Michael, you're lying in this essay. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's breath caught. She didn't remember this specific moment, but she recognized it. How many times had she said something similar to students over the decades? How many times had she tried to crack through the protective shells they built around their real selves? I was offended, Michael admitted. Angry, even. I said, I'm not lying. My dad is a good man. And you said... He paused, emotion cracking his voice. You said, I didn't say your father wasn't admirable. I said you're lying about admiring him the way you wrote it. You're writing what you think I want to hear. I want the truth, Michael. Even if it's messy. Even if it's painful. Especially if it's painful. That's where real writing lives. Eleanor's hand went to her mouth. Those were her words. Her philosophy. She'd said versions of that speech hundreds, maybe thousands of times, but she'd never known if any student had actually heard her. "I walked out of here furious," Michael said. "Who were you to tell me I was lying? You didn't know me. You didn't know my life. I went home and threw the assignment in the trash. You'd asked me to rewrite it, to find the truth, but I wasn't going to do it. I ignored it." He stood up from the student chair, pacing now, lost in the memory. Days went by. A week. You didn't push me. You just let me sit with it. And then... He turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Then something happened that made me understand exactly what you meant. Something that broke me open and made those words, 'I want the truth, even if it's painful,' suddenly make perfect sense." Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair, her heart pounding. 2 weeks after that conversation with you, I tried out for the varsity basketball team. I was a sophomore, but I was good enough. At least, I thought I was. His voice hardened. The coach cut me, put me on junior varsity instead. He took a kid named Leroy Smith over me. Leroy was taller, more developed. I was still growing, still awkward. Michael walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked football field. I was devastated, humiliated. Basketball was supposed to be the one thing I was decent at, and I couldn't even make the team. I went to the gym that afternoon, after everyone had left, sat alone in the bleachers, and I cried, "Mrs. Hartwell," I cried like a child, because everything felt impossible. Larry was succeeding at everything. I was failing at everything. What was the point? Eleanor felt tears sliding down her own cheeks. She could see that boy, alone and broken, so clearly now. "I had my backpack with me," Michael said, turning back to her, "and in it was my English notebook. Your assignment was still in there, the one I was supposed to rewrite. I pulled it out, and I thought about what you'd said. I want the truth, even if it's painful. And I thought, fine, you want painful? I'll give you painful." He walked back to the student chair and sat down again. I started writing, not an essay, just words, raw, angry, honest words about what it felt like to be cut, about feeling like a failure, about living in Larry's shadow, about the coach's face when he told me I wasn't good enough, about fear. Fear that maybe everyone was right, maybe I wasn't special, maybe I'd never be anyone worth remembering. Michael's voice was barely a whisper now. I wrote for 2 hours in those bleachers, pages and pages. I didn't stop to fix grammar or worry about whether sentences were pretty. I just wrote truth. Messy, painful truth. And something happened while I was writing, Mrs. Hartwell. Something shifted inside me. Eleanor leaned forward, hardly breathing. I realized that putting that pain on paper, naming it, facing it, it didn't make it go away, but it made it smaller somehow, manageable. And I understood what you were trying to teach me. That honesty, even about failure and fear, that's where power lives. Not in pretending everything is fine. Not in writing what people want to hear. In the truth. He pulled out his wallet, and from a worn leather sleeve, he carefully extracted several folded pieces of notebook paper, yellowed with age and soft from years of handling. "The next day, I left these on your desk," Michael said, holding them gently, with a note that said, "This is what you wanted. It's probably not good enough either." Then I avoided you for 3 days because I was terrified of what you'd say. Terrified you'd tell me my pain was stupid or that my writing was still garbage. Eleanor recognized those pages now, faintly, a memory surfacing from decades of similar moments. But on the 4th day, you cornered me after class. You handed me these pages, and at the top, in your red ink, you'd written... His voice broke completely. He held out the pages so she could see her own handwriting from 35 years ago. Eleanor's trembling fingers touched the paper. There, in her younger hand's red ink, she read, "Now this is writing. This is the real Michael Jordan. Don't ever hide him again." A+. The tears came freely now, for both of them. "That was the first time," Michael said, carefully refolding the precious pages and returning them to his wallet, "that I understood what it meant to compete with myself instead of others. You taught me that being honest about my pain, my failures, my fears, that was where my strength actually lived, not in comparing myself to Leroy Smith or Larry or anyone else, in being truthful about where I was and choosing, every single day, to be better than I was yesterday." Eleanor couldn't speak. She watched him through her tears. "I went back to that gym," Michael continued, "and I didn't try to beat Leroy Smith anymore. I tried to beat yesterday's Michael Jordan. Every practice, every shot, every drill, I asked myself, am I better than I was yesterday? Am I being honest about my weaknesses so I can fix them? Am I hiding from the truth or facing it?" He stood, walking to her desk, placing his hand near the mysterious wrapped box. "Mrs. Hartwell, you didn't just teach me how to write an honest essay. You taught me the philosophy that made me who I am, and I carried those pages." He touched his wallet. "For 41 years, through college, through the NBA, through 6 championships, through everything. Because they remind me where real strength comes from." Eleanor found her voice hoarse and small. "I had no idea. I just wanted you to find your voice." "You did more than that," Michael said. "So much more. But there's another part of this story. The most important part. The part about why that box is sitting on your desk right now." He glanced at the wrapped package, then back at her. "There's something else that happened. Something I've never told anyone. Something about how you saved my life without even knowing it." Eleanor's breath caught. "Michael, Please," he said gently. "Let me tell you. You need to know. Before you open that box, you need to understand what you really did." The rain had softened to a gentle patter. The classroom felt suspended in time, just the two of them and a story that had waited 35 years to be told. The rain had softened to a gentle patter. The classroom felt suspended in time, just the two of them and a story that had waited 35 years to be told. Michael walked back to the window, his reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight Eleanor had never heard before. Not in interviews, not in documentaries, not in any of the hundreds of times she'd seen him speak publicly over the decades. "Junior year," he said quietly. 1979. You remember it as the year I started excelling in your class. The year my writing finally clicked. But you don't know why." Eleanor shifted in her chair, her arthritic hands gripping the armrests. "That January, my father lost his job," Michael continued. "The plant where he worked for 15 years closed down. Just like that. 300 people unemployed right before Christmas, but the news didn't come until after the holidays, like a delayed bomb that exploded in our living room." He turned from the window, his face etched with old pain. "Everything changed overnight. Money disappeared. My mother started working double shifts at the bank. My father, this proud, strong man, he started taking odd jobs, yard work, handyman stuff, anything to keep food on the table, and I watched him shrink a little more each day, watched the light go out of his eyes." Eleanor's throat tightened. "My parents fought," Michael said. "Not loud, dramatic fights. Worse, quiet, Defeated arguments about bills and groceries and whether we'd lose the house. I'd lie in bed at night listening to my mother cry through the walls, listening to my father apologize for failing us, even though it wasn't his fault. He moved back to the student chair, sitting down heavily. My grades tanked. Everything except your class, math, history, science. I stopped caring, stopped trying. Basketball became an obsession, but not a healthy one. I wasn't playing for joy anymore. I was using it to escape, to run away from home, from reality, from everything. Michael's hands clenched into fists on his knees, and I started skipping meals, not because my parents couldn't feed me. My mother would have starved herself to feed her children. But I saw how little money we had. I saw her calculator on the kitchen table, adding and subtracting, trying to make numbers work that wouldn't work. So I started saying I wasn't hungry, started throwing away my lunch, started telling my mother I'd eaten at a friend's house. Eleanor's hand went to her mouth, tears already forming. I lost 15 pounds between January and March. I was already skinny, but I got skeletal. My basketball coach noticed but didn't say anything. Other teachers noticed but didn't say anything. Everyone just looked away. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. "Except you," Michael said, his eyes locking with Eleanor's. "You didn't look away." Eleanor shook her head, searching her memory, trying to remember. "It was a Tuesday in March," Michael said. "You asked me to stay after class. I thought I was in trouble for something. But when everyone else left, you went to your desk and pulled out a brown paper bag. You said, 'Michael, I accidentally packed 2 lunches today. I'm not going to be able to eat both of them. Would you mind helping me out so this doesn't go to waste?'" Eleanor's breath caught. A fragment of memory, hazy, but there. "It was a lie," Michael said softly. "A beautiful, necessary lie. There were 2 sandwiches in that bag, an apple, some cookies. You handed it to me like it was nothing, like it was an inconvenience you needed help solving. And I was so hungry, Mrs. Hartwell. So desperately hungry that I didn't even pretend to refuse. I just took it and ate." Tears rolled down Eleanor's cheeks now, silent and steady. "The next day, you accidentally packed 2 lunches again," Michael continued, his own voice thick. "And the day after that, for 3 months, you brought me food. You never acknowledged what you were really doing. Never made me feel like charity. Never made me feel small. You just kept forgetting that you'd already packed lunch and needing my help to not waste food." He stood up, pacing again, unable to sit still with the emotion. "Your classroom became my refuge. During lunch period, I noticed you started leaving the door unlocked. I'd slip in and sit in the back corner, right over there." He pointed to a desk by the window. "And I'd eat your sandwich. Sometimes you'd be there, grading papers. Sometimes you'd come in later. We didn't always talk. You just let me be there, safe." Eleanor pressed her hands to her face, sobbing now. "In April, you gave us another assignment," Michael said. "Write about a moment that changed you. Most kids wrote about getting their driver's license or making a sports team or some girlfriend drama. I wrote about watching my father cry." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I wrote about coming home early one day and finding him alone in the kitchen, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. About hearing this strong, proud man sob like a child because he couldn't provide for his family. About the shame I felt for him, and the shame I felt for feeling ashamed. About wanting to be the one who saved everyone but feeling powerless. About fear." Michael pulled another piece of paper from his wallet, different from the first one, but equally worn. "You wrote something on that essay that I've never forgotten," he said, holding it out so she could see her own red ink from decades ago. "You wrote, You cannot save everyone, but you can save yourself by refusing to let circumstances define who you become. You can choose, every single day, to compete with the person you were yesterday. And Michael, you're winning that competition." Eleanor stood on shaky legs, reaching for the paper, reading her own words through tears. "I didn't feel like I was winning anything," Michael said. "But you believed I was. And somehow, that belief became a rope I could hold on to when everything else felt like it was slipping away." He carefully took the paper back, refolding it with reverent precision. "My father found work again in May. Not the same job, not the same pay, but enough. We survived. I got my basketball scholarship to UNC. Life moved forward. But Mrs. Hartwell," his voice cracked completely, "if you hadn't fed me those sandwiches, if you hadn't given me a safe place to just exist, if you hadn't taught me that I could choose who to become regardless of my circumstances, I don't know if I would have made it through that year." "Michael," Eleanor whispered, "I just made sandwiches. It was such a small thing." "No," he said firmly, stepping closer to her. "It wasn't small. It was everything. Don't you see? You taught me the most important lesson of my entire life, that small, consistent acts, whether it's bringing an extra sandwich or practicing one more hour or writing one honest sentence, those daily choices are what build everything that matters. Not grand gestures, not one big moment. Daily choices to show up and be better than yesterday." He gestured broadly, encompassing everything. "Every championship I won, every game I played, every moment I wanted to quit but didn't, it all came back to that. To you teaching me that consistency and honesty and small acts of kindness compound over time into something extraordinary. You didn't just feed me, Mrs. Hartwell. You taught me how to live." Eleanor sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. "After I graduated, after I went to UNC, after I made it to the NBA, I wanted to thank you. I wanted to tell you what you'd done. But I convinced myself you wouldn't remember me. That I was just one kid in thousands. That my gratitude wouldn't matter." He walked to her desk, placing his hand on the wrapped box. "So, instead, I wrote to you. Not letters I sent, but letters I kept. Every time something significant happened in my life, I wrote you a letter explaining how your lessons had shown up in that moment. My first college game, my first NBA contract, each championship, my children's births, my failures and comebacks, everything." Eleanor's eyes widened, staring at the box. "Those letters are in here," Michael said quietly. 41 years of them. Every major moment of my life, documented and traced back to what you taught me in this classroom. About honest self-examination, about daily improvement, about choosing who to become." He paused, his hand still resting on the box. "But there's more than just letters in here. There's something else. Something that will show you that you didn't just change one life. You changed thousands. And you need to understand that before you open this." Eleanor looked up at him, her face wet with tears, unable to speak. "Do you know what I did with the philosophy you taught me?" Michael asked. "I shared it. With teammates, with young players, with business partners. Your words, compete with yourself, tell the truth, show up every day. They've been spoken by coaches and teachers and parents to millions of kids who never even knew they originated in this room." He knelt beside her chair, his famous face level with hers, and took her trembling hand. "Mrs. Hartwell, you've spent 42 years wondering if you made a difference. Standing in this classroom day after day, teaching kids who mostly forgot you the moment they graduated, bringing extra sandwiches to hungry students, writing notes in red ink that you thought no one kept, believing that small acts of kindness and daily lessons about integrity mattered even when you had no proof. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm here to tell you that you didn't just make a difference. You started a revolution of kindness and self-improvement that's still spreading. And the proof, all the proof you ever needed, is in that box. Eleanor looked at the mysterious package, then back at Michael's earnest face. But before you open it, he said, I need to tell you one more story. The most important one. About a little girl who's waiting to meet you. Michael stood and walked to the window again, gathering his thoughts. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the world outside clean and glistening. After I retired from basketball, he began, I started the Michael Jordan Foundation. You probably heard about it. Most people think it's about basketball scholarships and youth sports programs. And it is, partly. But the real mission, the heart of it, is something else entirely. He turned to face Eleanor. We find kids who are struggling. Not just academically, though, that's part of it. Kids who are hungry. Kids whose families are falling apart. Kids who are one bad month away from homelessness. Kids who feel invisible and powerless and convinced they don't matter. Kids like I was in 1979. Eleanor listened, her hands folded in her lap, the mysterious box just inches away on her desk. We don't just throw money at them, Michael continued. We give them what you gave me, a safe place, consistent support, someone who sees them, and we teach them your philosophy, that they can choose to compete with yesterday's version of themselves. That honesty about their struggles is strength, not weakness. That small daily acts of improvement compound into transformed lives. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos, then held it out to Eleanor. On the screen was a young girl, maybe 10 years old, with dark braided hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She was holding a basketball and grinning at the camera. Her name is Jasmine Clark, Michael said softly. 2 years ago, she was living in her mother's car. Her father left when she was 6. Her mother works 3 jobs, but still can't afford rent in Charlotte. Jasmine would do her homework by streetlight in a McDonald's parking lot. She'd shower at the YMCA. She'd wear the same clothes to school 3 days in a row. Eleanor's heart clenched. A teacher noticed, Michael continued. A teacher who reminded me of you. She saw that Jasmine was brilliant but struggling. She saw the hunger in her eyes, not just for food, though there was that too. Hunger for something more, for a chance, for someone to believe she mattered. He swiped to another photo. Jasmine in a school uniform, standing in front of a beautiful brick building. That teacher contacted our foundation. We gave Jasmine a full scholarship to one of the best private schools in Charlotte. We provided housing assistance for her mother. We made sure she had clothes, school supplies, 3 meals a day. Everything she needed to just focus on being a kid and learning. Michael's voice grew thick with emotion. But more than that, we paired her with a mentor. Someone who met with her twice a week to talk about her goals, her fears, her struggles. Someone who taught her that her circumstances didn't define her, that she could choose every single day to be better than she was yesterday. He swiped to another photo, Jasmine shaking hands with Michael himself, both of them smiling. Last year, she made the honor roll. She became captain of her school's basketball team. Not because she's the best player, but because she works the hardest and encourages her teammates to compete with themselves instead of each other. She started a writing club at school where kids share their honest stories, their real struggles, not the polished versions they think adults want to hear. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for the phone, looking more closely at Jasmine's bright, hopeful face. 3 weeks ago, Michael said, Jasmine wrote me a letter. Would you like to hear what she said?" Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. Michael pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket, not old and worn like the others, but fresh, covered in careful, youthful handwriting. He read aloud, "Dear Mr. Jordan, my mentor tells me that you became great because you learned to compete with yourself instead of others. She says you learned that from your high school teacher, and that teacher learned it from her teacher, and it goes back and back like a chain of people helping people. I want to be part of that chain. I want to learn this thing that helped you so I can teach it to someone else someday. Can you tell me about the person who taught you? I want to know her name. I want to know what she said that changed everything. Because if I know, then maybe I can say it to someone else when I grow up. And the chain will keep going. Thank you for my scholarship and for believing in me. But mostly, thank you for teaching me that I can choose who I become. Love, Jasmine." Eleanor was sobbing openly now, clutching the phone with Jasmine's picture. "When I read that letter," Michael said, his own voice breaking, "I realized something. I'd been carrying your lessons for 41 years, teaching them to others, watching them spread, but you never knew. You never got to see the chain you started. You've been standing in this classroom wondering if any of it mattered. And meanwhile, your philosophy has touched thousands of lives." He gently took the phone back and knelt beside her chair again. "Jasmine is the 1,000th child our foundation has given a full scholarship to. 1,000 kids who were hungry, struggling, invisible, now thriving, and every single one of them has been taught your lessons. Compete with yourself, tell your truth, show up every day, and choose to be better." Eleanor could barely breathe through her tears. "But here's what you don't know," Michael continued. "Here's the part that made me realize I had to come here, had to tell you this story, had to make sure you understood before you retired and disappeared and never knew what you'd built." He took both her hands in his. "Those 1,000 kids, they're teaching it to others. Jasmine's writing club has 30 members who are learning to tell their honest stories. A boy named Marcus, who got our scholarship 4 years ago, is now a high school teacher in Atlanta, and he teaches your philosophy to 150 students every year. A girl named Aisha, who we helped, is now a youth basketball coach, and she makes every kid on her team write about their struggles and their daily improvements." Michael's grip tightened. "Do you understand what I'm saying? Your kindness to one hungry, struggling boy in 1979 didn't just save that boy. It created a cascade that's still growing. Thousands of kids, tens of thousands maybe. All of them learning that small, consistent acts of honesty and improvement can transform a life. All of them being taught that they matter, that they can choose who to become, that competing with yesterday's version of themselves is the only competition that counts." He released her hands and stood, walking back to her desk where the wrapped box waited. "I called Jasmine last week," Michael said. "I told her about you. I told her that the teacher who changed my life, who started this whole chain, was retiring in December. And do you know what she said?" Eleanor shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She said, "I want to meet her. I want to thank her. I want to tell her that she saved my life, even though she never met me." And then she said something that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. Michael's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She said, "Do you think she knows she's a hero? Do you think she knows that bringing you sandwiches and teaching you to compete with yourself saved 1,000 kids she never even met? Because if she doesn't know, Mr. Jordan, you have to tell her. You have to make sure she knows before it's too late." Eleanor covered her face with her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs. "So that's why I'm here," Michael said. "That's why I couldn't let another day pass. Because you've spent 42 years in this room, Mrs. Hartwell, bringing extra sandwiches to hungry kids, writing notes in red ink that you thought no one kept, teaching lessons about honesty and daily improvement that you thought no one remembered. You've stood here wondering if any of it mattered." He placed his hand on the wrapped box. "And I'm here to tell you that it mattered more than you could possibly imagine. You didn't just change one life. You changed thousands. You started a revolution of kindness that's still spreading, still growing, still saving kids who don't even know your name yet." Michael's voice grew stronger, more insistent. "You taught me that small, consistent acts compound into something extraordinary. Well, Mrs. Hartwell, your small, consistent acts of bringing sandwiches and writing honest feedback and believing in struggling kids, they've compounded into 41 years of changed lives, into a foundation that's helped 1,000 children, into coaches and teachers and mentors who are spreading your philosophy to tens of thousands more." He gestured to the box. "Every letter in here documents a moment when your lessons showed up in my life. My first college game where I competed with myself instead of the opponent. My first NBA contract where I remembered that daily improvement matters more than talent. Each championship where I taught my teammates to be honest about their weaknesses so we could get stronger together. My children's births where I promised to teach them your lessons. Every single major moment traced back to you." Eleanor looked up at him, her face ravaged by tears, but also by something else, a dawning understanding, a slowly building joy. "But the letters are just part of it," Michael said. "There's something else in that box, something that proves you didn't just inspire one person's career, something that shows your legacy is alive and growing and touching lives you'll never meet." He picked up the box and held it out to her with both hands, like an offering. "Before you open it, I need you to understand something. I need you to really hear this. You are not just a teacher who's retiring after 42 years. You are the beginning of a chain of kindness and self-improvement that has reached across decades and touched thousands of lives. You are the reason Jasmine Clark is thriving instead of homeless. You are the reason 1,000 kids have hope. You are the reason I learned to compete with myself and win 6 championships." His voice broke completely. "You are the reason I'm standing here today. And Mrs. Hartwell, you need to know that before you leave this classroom for the last time. You need to know that you didn't just make a difference. You made the difference, the one that mattered most." Eleanor took the box with trembling hands, feeling the weight of it. "Open it," Michael said softly. "It's time." Eleanor's arthritic fingers worked at the string, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the knot. Michael reached over gently and helped her, pulling the string free. The brown paper fell away, revealing a beautiful wooden box underneath, polished to a deep shine with intricate carvings along the edges, small figures of children reading, writing, playing. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled carefully, were stacks of envelopes, dozens of them, all addressed to her in Michael's handwriting, all sealed but never sent. 41 years of letters she never knew existed. Eleanor lifted the first one with trembling fingers. The postmark date was written in the corner, March 29th, 1982. "That was the day UNC won the NCAA championship," Michael said quietly. "The day I hit the game-winning shot against Georgetown. Go ahead, read it." Eleanor carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was younger, less refined than Michael's current hand, but unmistakably his. Dear Mrs. Hartwell, today I took the last shot in the national championship game. We won. Everyone is calling me a hero, but all I could think about standing at that free throw line was what you taught me in 10th grade. I wasn't competing with Georgetown. I wasn't competing with Patrick Ewing or any of their players. I was competing with the scared 15-year-old who got cut from varsity, the one who thought he'd never be good enough. That kid wouldn't have taken this shot. He would have passed it to someone else, someone he thought was better, more deserving. But I took it, because you taught me that the only person I need to beat is yesterday's Michael Jordan, and today's Michael Jordan was ready. Thank you for teaching me to compete with myself. Thank you for those sandwiches. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. I wish I had the courage to send this letter, but I figure you probably don't even remember me. Still, I wanted you to know that tonight, when everyone is celebrating, I'm thinking about room 207 and the teacher who changed my life. Sincerely, Michael Jordan. Eleanor pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing. Michael knelt beside her chair, his own eyes wet. There are 47 letters in there, he said, one for every major moment. Keep reading. She opened another, dated June 19th, 1984, NBA Draft Day. Another from June 12th, 1991, his first championship. Each letter detailed not just the event, but how Eleanor's lessons had appeared in that moment. How competing with himself instead of others had shaped his training. How honesty about his weaknesses had made him stronger. How daily, consistent improvement had built a career. There were letters about his children's births, explaining how he planned to teach them the same lessons. Letters about his father's death, about how the writing Eleanor had taught him helped him process grief. Letters about failures and comebacks, each one tracing back to that classroom in 1978. Eleanor read through them one by one, crying, laughing, shaking her head in disbelief. 41 years of gratitude she never knew existed. 41 years of proof that she had mattered. Beneath the letters were photographs. Young Michael with Eleanor in 1980, a Polaroid she didn't remember taking, probably from a school event, him in his UNC uniform, his wedding day, his children as babies, then toddlers, then teenagers, championship celebrations, Hall of Fame induction, and interspersed with Michael's photos were others, children she didn't recognize, kids of different ages, different backgrounds, all smiling at the camera. Those are some of the scholarship recipients, Michael explained. Kids the foundation has helped. I wanted you to see their faces, to know that your kindness to one struggling boy multiplied into all of these lives. Eleanor touched each photo tenderly, looking into the eyes of children she'd never met but had somehow helped save. At the very bottom of the box, beneath all the letters and photographs, was a single brass key on a simple chain. Eleanor held it up, confused. What does this open? Michael stood and walked to the window, then turned to face her, his expression a mixture of joy and nervousness. 6 months ago, he said, I bought a building in downtown Wilmington. It's been under renovation ever since. We finished it last week. Eleanor's breath caught. It's called the Eleanor Hartwell Writing Center, Michael continued, his voice thick with emotion. It's a place where struggling kids who are hungry, homeless, failing, invisible, can come to find their voice through writing. Just like you helped me find mine. The key fell from Eleanor's trembling fingers. Michael picked it up and placed it back in her palm, closing her fingers around it. There are free meals every day, he said, because no kid should have to write on an empty stomach. There are mentors, teachers, writers, counselors who volunteer their time. There are quiet rooms where kids can just be safe, just like your classroom was safe for me. And there are writing workshops where we teach them exactly what you taught me. That honesty, even about pain and failure, is where strength lives. Eleanor couldn't speak. She clutched the key, staring at Michael through her tears. Every student who enters that center will learn your philosophy, Michael continued. Compete with yourself. Tell your truth. Show up every day and choose to be better than yesterday. Your name will be on the wall. Your lessons will echo through those halls, and every single kid who finds their voice there, who gets a meal there, who feels safe there, they'll know it started with a teacher in room 207 who cared enough to bring extra sandwiches. He pulled out his phone again and showed her pictures of the building. A beautiful, restored brick structure with large windows and the words, Eleanor Hartwell Writing Center, carved in stone above the entrance. The dedication ceremony is November 16th, Michael said. 3 weeks from now. I want you there. I want Jasmine and the other 999 scholarship kids there. I want them to meet you. I want them to shake your hand and look you in the eye and tell you thank you. I want them to know that a teacher's small acts of kindness can ripple across decades and change thousands of lives. Eleanor finally found her voice, broken and small. Michael, I don't deserve this. I just made sandwiches. I just taught English. Stop, Michael said firmly but gently. Stop diminishing what you did. You saved my life. You taught me how to live. And through me, you've saved 1,000 other lives. This center will save thousands more. Do you understand? Your legacy isn't retiring in December. Your legacy is just beginning to grow. He knelt beside her again, taking both her hands. Mrs. Hartwell, for 42 years, you've stood in this classroom wondering if you made a difference. Grading papers covered in red ink that you thought no one kept. Teaching lessons you thought no one remembered. Bringing extra lunches to kids who you thought forgot you the moment they graduated. His grip tightened on her hands. But I kept everything. The essays, the comments, the lessons, and I built a life on them. A career, a foundation, a philosophy that's still spreading. You didn't just teach me English, Mrs. Hartwell. You taught me how to be human, how to be honest, how to compete with myself, how to turn pain into strength, and small daily acts into extraordinary achievement. Eleanor was shaking, overwhelmed by the weight of his words, the proof in the box, the key in her palm. You know what the most beautiful part is? Michael asked, his voice soft. You did all of this without knowing. You changed my life and never asked for credit. You fed me and never asked for thanks. You taught me and never needed validation. You just did the work, day after day, because you believed it mattered even when you had no proof. He smiled through his tears. Well, here's your proof, Mrs. Hartwell. 41 years of it. A building with your name on it. 1,000 kids whose lives you saved. Tens of thousands more who will learn your lessons. And me, a kid you fed sandwiches to who grew up to feed others because you taught him that small acts of kindness compound into revolutions. Eleanor pulled Michael into a hug, this legend who was once a skinny, scared boy in her classroom. They held each other and cried for lost time, for found gratitude, for a connection that had silently shaped decades. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor looked at the box full of letters, the photographs of smiling children, the key that would open a building bearing her name. I'll be there, she whispered, at the dedication. I'll meet Jasmine and all of them. I'll tell them what I told you, that they don't need to be perfect. They just need to show up, tell their truth, and try to be better than they were yesterday." "That's all I wanted to hear," Michael said, standing and helping her to her feet. "That's why I came, to make sure you knew, to make sure you understood that you didn't just teach one kid English in 1978. You started something that will outlive both of us." He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "One more thing, Mrs. Hartwell. Those sandwiches you brought me, I know they weren't accidents. I knew it then, and I know it now. You saw a hungry kid and you fed him without making him feel small. That kindness, that dignity you gave me. I've tried to give that to every person I've helped since. You taught me that how you help matters as much as that you help." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "Thank you," Michael said simply, "for everything. For seeing me, for feeding me, for teaching me, for saving my life, for starting a chain of kindness that's still growing. Thank you." He opened the door, then looked back one more time. "See you in 3 weeks, Mrs. Hartwell. The world is going to know your name, and 1,000 kids are going to thank you for changing their lives even though you never met them. Get ready." And then he was gone, leaving Eleanor alone in room 207 with a box full of letters, a key to a building bearing her name, and the overwhelming, beautiful truth that 42 years of small, consistent acts of kindness had built something extraordinary. She sat down at her desk and pulled out a blank piece of paper. After 42 years of writing comments on other people's work, she began to write her own truth. "Dear students I'll never meet, my name is Eleanor Hartwell, and I've been a teacher for 42 years. For most of that time, I wondered if I made any difference at all. I wondered if the sandwiches I brought, the notes I wrote, the lessons I taught, if any of it mattered. Today, I learned that it did. That one act of kindness to one struggling student rippled across 4 decades and touched thousands of lives I'll never meet. And I want you to know it is something important. You don't need to change the world all at once. You just need to show up tomorrow and be a little better, a little kinder, a little more honest than you were today. Small acts compound. Daily improvements multiply. One sandwich can save a life. One honest sentence can change everything. Compete with yourself, not others. Tell your truth, even when it's painful. Choose every single day to become the person you want to be. And know that your kindness will ripple further than you can imagine. That your small acts matter more than you know. That you are starting chains of goodness that will outlive you. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for thanks. Just do the work and trust that it matters. Because it does. I promise you, it does. With love and gratitude, Eleanor Hartwell. She folded the letter and placed it in the box with Michael's letters, the photographs, and the key. Then she stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the football field where generations of students had grown up. The sun was breaking through the clouds now, painting the wet grass in gold. In 3 weeks, she would stand in a building bearing her name and meet 1,000 children whose lives she'd saved without knowing. She would see the proof that 42 years of showing up, of caring, of bringing extra sandwiches, and writing honest feedback in red ink, that all of it had mattered more than she ever imagined. Eleanor smiled through her tears. For the first time in 4 decades, she knew with absolute certainty that her life's work hadn't been in vain. Small acts, repeated daily with love and consistency, had built a revolution, and it was still growing. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and disbelief. Eleanor told no one at first, not her colleagues, not her family. She kept the wooden box in her desk drawer and would open it during lunch, reading Michael's letters one by one, touching the photographs of children she'd never met, holding the brass key that felt impossibly heavy with meaning. At night, she dreamed of that boy in the bleachers, writing his truth on notebook paper. She dreamed of sandwiches wrapped in brown paper bags. She dreamed of red ink and honest words, and the thousands of small moments that had somehow, impossibly, added up to this. November 16th arrived cold and clear. Eleanor stood in front of her bathroom mirror that morning, her hands trembling as she tried to clasp the necklace her late husband had given her 40 years ago. She was wearing her best dress, navy blue with small white flowers, and had taken special care with her hair. At 67, she felt simultaneously ancient and newborn. Her daughter Rebecca drove her to downtown Wilmington, chattering nervously about the crowd that would be there, about meeting Michael Jordan, about the news crews that had been setting up since dawn. Eleanor barely heard her. She clutched the wooden box in her lap and watched the familiar streets of her hometown roll past. When they turned onto Market Street, Eleanor gasped. The Eleanor Hartwell Writing Center stood 3 stories tall, its red brick facade gleaming in the November sun. A massive banner hung across the front, grand opening honoring 42 years of changing lives. A crowd had already gathered, hundreds of people, maybe more. Rebecca pulled into a reserved parking spot, but Eleanor couldn't move. She sat in the passenger seat, staring at her name carved in stone above the entrance. "Mom," Rebecca said softly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Are you okay?" "I'm terrified," Eleanor whispered. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I disappoint them?" "Mom," Rebecca turned to face her fully. "You fed a hungry kid sandwiches 40 years ago without making him feel small. You taught him to compete with himself. You saved his life, and through him, you saved 1,000 more. You couldn't disappoint them if you tried." Eleanor took a shaky breath and nodded. Together, they walked toward the building. A young woman in her 20s met them at the entrance. She had kind eyes and a clipboard. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Maria Santos, the center's director. Mr. Jordan is waiting for you inside. The ceremony starts in 30 minutes, but he wanted time with you first." Eleanor followed Maria through the entrance, and her breath caught. The interior was beautiful. High ceilings with exposed beams, warm wooden floors, walls painted in soft creams and blues. Comfortable reading nooks filled with books lined one wall. Long tables with notebooks and pens filled the center of the room. Along the back wall was a full kitchen with industrial refrigerators. "We serve breakfast and lunch every day," Maria explained. "Dinner on weekdays. No questions asked. Any kid can come in and eat, write, study, or just sit somewhere safe." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she took it all in. "Mrs. Hartwell," a deep voice called from across the room. Michael Jordan emerged from a side office, smiling broadly. He wore a dark suit and looked every inch the legend he was, but his eyes were warm and slightly nervous. "You came?" "Of course I came," Eleanor said, her voice cracking. Michael embraced her gently. "There are some people who want to meet you. Are you ready?" Before Eleanor could answer, a side door opened and children began filing into the room, dozens of them, then hundreds. They kept coming, filling every space, their faces bright with curiosity and excitement. Young children, teenagers, young adults, all the scholarship recipients Michael had mentioned. And at the front of the group, holding the hand of a young woman Eleanor recognized from photographs, was Jasmine Clark. She was taller than Eleanor had imagined, maybe 12 now, with intelligent eyes and her hair in neat braids tied with yellow ribbons. When she saw Eleanor, her face broke into a radiant smile. "Mrs. Hartwell, Jasmine said, her voice small and awed. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. Jasmine walked forward slowly, then faster, and then she was running. She threw her arms around Eleanor's waist and held on tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving Mr. Jordan so he could save me." Eleanor wrapped her arms around this child she'd never met and sobbed. Over Jasmine's head, she could see the faces of hundreds of other children, all watching, all waiting, all here because of sandwiches and red ink and honest words spoken decades ago. Michael placed his hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'd like you to meet the 1,000 reasons your life's work mattered." One by one, the children approached. They shook her hand. They hugged her. They told her their names and their stories. Marcus, 17, who had been homeless and was now headed to college. Aisha, 15, who coached youth basketball and taught her players to compete with themselves. David, 22, who was now a teacher himself in Atlanta. Maya, 8, who loved to write stories and came to the center every day after school. Each child thanked her. Each one carried a piece of the philosophy she'd taught Michael without knowing it would spread this far. The ceremony began at 2 o'clock. Folding chairs had been set up outside the building, and the crowd had swollen to nearly 1,000 people. News cameras lined the back. Eleanor sat in the front row between Michael and Jasmine, holding the young girl's hand. The mayor spoke about the importance of literacy and community support. The superintendent of schools praised Michael's philanthropy. Local business leaders discussed their contributions to the center's endowment. Then Michael stood and walked to the podium. The crowd fell silent. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Most of you know me as a basketball player. 6 championships, 5 MVPs, Hall of Fame career. But none of that, not one championship, not one MVP, not one moment of success, would have happened without the woman sitting in the front row." He gestured to Eleanor, and the crowd turned to look at her. She felt her face flush. "In 1978, I was a struggling 15-year-old kid," Michael continued. "I'd just been cut from the varsity basketball team. My family was facing financial crisis. I was skipping meals to save money. I was lost, scared, and convinced I'd never be good enough at anything." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Then a teacher named Eleanor Hartwell did 2 things that changed my life. First, she taught me to compete with myself instead of others. She taught me that honesty about my struggles was strength, not weakness. She taught me that small daily improvements compound into extraordinary achievement." He paused, looking directly at Eleanor. "Second, she fed me. For 3 months, she brought extra sandwiches to school and asked me to help her not waste food. She never made me feel like charity. She never made me feel small. She just gave me what I needed, food and dignity, and asked for nothing in return." The crowd was silent, riveted. Those lessons, compete with yourself, tell your truth, show up every day, help others with dignity, became the foundation of everything I achieved. Every championship I won, I was competing with yesterday's Michael Jordan. Every setback I faced, I was honest about my weaknesses so I could improve. Every day, I showed up and chose to be better. Michael's voice strengthened. "And when I started this foundation, I knew I wanted to do for other kids what Mrs. Hartwell did for me. Give them food. Give them safety. Give them someone who sees them and believes in them. Teach them that their circumstances don't define them, but their daily choices do." He gestured to the children sitting in the front rows. "These 1,000 young people represent 41 years of Mrs. Hartwell's lessons spreading across generations. Kids who were hungry are now fed. Kids who were homeless now have stability. Kids who thought they didn't matter Now know they do. And every single one of them has been taught to compete with themselves, to tell their truth, and to help others the way they were helped. Michael looked back at Eleanor, his eyes glistening. Mrs. Hartwell spent 42 years in a classroom wondering if she made a difference, standing at the same desk, teaching the same lessons, bringing extra sandwiches, writing notes in red ink that she thought no one kept. She retired last month, not knowing that she'd changed thousands of lives. He paused for effect. Today, we're here to make sure she knows. This building bears her name, not because she donated money. She didn't. Not because she's famous. She isn't. But because she embodies what this center stands for: the power of small, consistent acts of kindness, and the belief that every person can choose to become better than they were yesterday. The crowd erupted in applause. Eleanor sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, as 1,000 people stood and clapped for her. Michael waited for the applause to die down, then continued. I asked Mrs. Hartwell to prepare some words to share today. Mrs. Hartwell, would you please join me? Eleanor's legs barely held her as she walked to the podium. Jasmine squeezed her hand before letting go. The crowd was a blur of faces. Students, parents, teachers, strangers, all looking at her with expectation and gratitude. She pulled out the letter she'd written 3 weeks ago, her hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. Then she looked up at the faces in front of her, especially the children in the front rows, and decided to speak from her heart instead. I don't have Michael's eloquence, she began, her voice trembling. I'm just a teacher. For 42 years, I showed up to the same classroom and tried to convince teenagers that writing mattered, that their voices mattered, that they mattered. She took a breath. Most days I failed. Most days I went home exhausted and discouraged, wondering if anyone was listening, wondering if anything I did would outlast me, wondering if I'd wasted my life. Her voice grew stronger. 3 weeks ago, Michael Jordan walked into my classroom and told me I hadn't. He showed me letters I never received, photographs of children I never met, and gave me a key to a building I never imagined. He told me that one act of kindness, bringing a hungry student sandwiches, had rippled across 4 decades and touched thousands of lives. Eleanor looked directly at the children in the front row. I want to tell you what I've learned. You don't need to do something big to change the world. You don't need to be famous or wealthy or special. You just need to show up tomorrow and be a little kinder, a little more honest, a little better than you were today. Her voice filled with passion. Small acts matter. Daily improvements multiply. One sandwich can save a life. One honest word can change everything. Don't wait for proof that your kindness matters. Don't wait for thanks. Just do the work and trust that it ripples further than you can see. She pointed to the building behind her. This center exists because I made sandwiches. Think about that. I didn't cure cancer. I didn't end poverty. I just made extra sandwiches for a hungry kid and taught him to compete with himself. And somehow, impossibly, that small act grew into this. Eleanor's voice broke with emotion. So to every child here today, I want you to know, you have that same power. Your small acts of kindness will ripple across decades. Your daily choice to be better will inspire others. Your truth, shared honestly, will help someone else tell theirs. You are starting chains of goodness that will outlive you. She looked at Jasmine, who was crying openly. Don't let anyone tell you you're too young or too small or too broken to make a difference. Michael Jordan was a scared 15-year-old who'd been cut from his basketball team. Look at him now. Look at what he built. And know that it started with a choice to compete with himself, to tell his truth, to show up every day. Eleanor's voice softened. You can make that same choice, and when you do, you'll start your own chain of kindness. Someone will notice. Someone will be changed, and decades from now, they'll stand somewhere and tell a story about the person who believed in them when no one else did, about the small act that saved their life. She looked out at the crowd, at Michael, at the building bearing her name. Thank you for this honor. Thank you for showing me that 42 years of small acts added up to something extraordinary. Thank you for teaching me that I didn't waste my life after all. Her final words were barely a whisper, but in the silence, everyone heard them. Small acts, repeated with love, change everything. Never forget that. The crowd exploded into applause. Eleanor stood at the podium, overwhelmed as 1,000 people rose to their feet. Michael embraced her. Jasmine ran up and hugged her again, and Eleanor Hartwell, retired English teacher, finally understood that her life's work would echo across generations she would never meet. The chains of kindness she'd started 42 years ago were still growing, and they would never stop. 5 years later, Eleanor Hartwell sat in her favorite reading nook at the Eleanor Hartwell Writing Center, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. At 72, she came here 3 days a week, not because she had to, but because she couldn't stay away. The center had become her second home. She'd watch children filter in after school, some hungry, some hurting, all searching for something they couldn't quite name. She'd see them grab sandwiches from the kitchen without shame, settle into comfortable chairs with notebooks, and begin to write their truths. Sometimes they asked her for help. Sometimes they just wanted to sit near her, as if proximity to the woman whose name graced the building might transfer some of her magic. She always told them the same thing. There's no magic. Just show up tomorrow and be better than you were today. Today was special. Jasmine Clark was graduating from high school, and she'd asked Eleanor to attend the ceremony. Eleanor watched through the window as families began arriving at Wilmington High School across the street, their faces bright with pride and hope. Mrs. Hartwell? A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor turned to find a young girl, maybe 9 years old, with dark curls and uncertain eyes. She didn't recognize her, which meant she was new to the center. Yes, sweetheart? My name is Sophia, the girl said, clutching a notebook to her chest. Miss Maria said you're the lady who started all this. Is that true? Eleanor smiled. I helped start it, yes, but really, it started because someone was kind to me when I was young, and I tried to be kind to someone else, and he was kind to others, and it just kept growing. Sophia nodded solemnly. I came here because my teacher said I could get help with writing, and also, she looked down, also because I'm hungry a lot. My mom works 2 jobs and sometimes there's not much food. Eleanor's heart clenched. 47 years later, and children were still hungry, still struggling, still needing what she'd given Michael all those years ago. Well, you're in the right place, Eleanor said gently. Would you like to have lunch with me? I was just about to make myself a sandwich. Sophia's eyes widened. Really? Really? Come on. In the kitchen, Eleanor made 2 sandwiches, turkey and cheese, just like she used to make for Michael. She added apples and cookies to the plates and sat across from Sophia at one of the long tables. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Sophia said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Miss Maria says you were a teacher for a really long time. Did you always know you were helping people?" Eleanor set down her sandwich and really looked at this child, this girl who was so much like the boy Michael had been, hungry and hopeful and trying so hard to be brave. No, Eleanor said honestly. For most of my life, I had no idea if anything I did mattered. I just showed up every day and did my best. It wasn't until I was 67 years old that I learned my small acts had changed thousands of lives. Sophia's brow furrowed. That's sad. You didn't know for such a long time. It is sad, Eleanor agreed. But it's also beautiful, because it means I wasn't kind because I wanted credit or thanks. I was kind just because it was the right thing to do, and that's the best kind of kindness, the kind that expects nothing back. Sophia considered this, then said, I want to be a teacher someday, like you, so I can help kids who are hungry. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Then you will be. And Sophia, you don't have to wait until you're a teacher to start helping people. You can start right now. Every time you're kind to someone, every time you share something you have, every time you tell the truth even when it's hard, you're starting a chain that will grow bigger than you can imagine. The girl's face brightened. Really? Really. I made sandwiches for one boy, and look what happened. Eleanor gestured around the center. You never know how far your kindness will reach. They finished their lunch, and Eleanor helped Sophia start her first writing exercise, a journal entry about something that mattered to her. As she watched the girl's pen move across the page, Eleanor thought about all the children who'd sat in this very spot over the past 5 years. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all learning the same lessons she'd taught Michael. Compete with yourself, tell your truth, show up every day. Her phone buzzed, a text from Michael, heading to Jasmine's graduation. See you there. Eleanor smiled and replied, wouldn't miss it. An hour later, Eleanor sat in the packed gymnasium of Wilmington High School, surrounded by proud parents and excited graduates. Michael slipped into the seat beside her just as the ceremony began, drawing whispers and pointed fingers from people who recognized him. Thanks for coming, he whispered. Thank you for inviting me. They watched as the graduates filed in, their caps and gowns rustling, their faces glowing with accomplishment. And there, in the third row, was Jasmine Clark, no longer the 10-year-old girl who'd lived in her mother's car, but a confident young woman who'd earned a full scholarship to Duke University. When the principal called Jasmine's name, the applause was thunderous. But Jasmine didn't walk straight to receive her diploma. Instead, she walked to the microphone the valedictorian had used earlier. The principal looked confused, but Jasmine smiled at him and said something that made him nod and step back. I know this isn't normal, Jasmine said into the microphone, her voice strong and clear. But I asked permission to say something before I accept my diploma, and Principal Martinez was kind enough to agree. The gymnasium fell silent. 5 years ago, I was homeless, Jasmine said simply. I lived in a car with my mother. I did my homework by streetlight. I wore the same clothes for days. I was hungry all the time, and I was convinced I didn't matter, that my life would never be anything more than survival. Eleanor gripped the edge of her seat, tears already forming. Then a teacher noticed me. She saw that I was struggling, and she reached out to the Michael Jordan Foundation. They gave me a scholarship, helped my mother find housing, and introduced me to the Eleanor Hartwell Writing Center, and everything changed. Jasmine looked directly at Eleanor and Michael in the audience. Mr. Jordan taught me that I could compete with myself instead of my circumstances, that I could choose every single day to be better than I was yesterday. And Mrs. Hartwell taught me, her voice cracked with emotion, Mrs. Hartwell taught me that small acts of kindness ripple across time and change lives you'll never meet. She held up a small notebook. This is my journal from 5 years ago. The first entry says, I met a lady today named Mrs. Hartwell. She didn't even know me, but she saved my life by being kind to someone else 40 years ago. When I grow up, I want to save someone's life too. The gymnasium was utterly silent except for the sound of people crying. Today, I'm graduating with a 4.0 GPA. I'm going to Duke on a full scholarship. I'm going to study education because I want to be a teacher like Mrs. Hartwell. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life teaching kids the same lesson she taught Mr. Jordan, and he taught me, that you don't have to be special to change the world. You just have to show up, be kind, and choose to be better than you were yesterday. Jasmine walked down from the stage, past the principal holding her diploma, straight to Eleanor. She wrapped her arms around the older woman and whispered, Thank you for making sandwiches. Thank you for starting the chain that saved me. Eleanor held her tight, this girl who embodied everything she'd ever hoped teaching could accomplish. Michael stood too, and suddenly all three of them were embracing. 3 generations connected by kindness, by sandwiches, by the simple choice to see someone who was struggling and refused to look away. The gymnasium erupted in applause, but Eleanor barely heard it. All she could feel was Jasmine's arms around her and the overwhelming knowledge that this moment, this beautiful, impossible moment, existed because she'd made extra sandwiches 47 years ago. After the ceremony, after the photographs and congratulations, Eleanor found herself in the parking lot with Michael and Jasmine, watching the sun set over Wilmington. I got an email last week, Michael said quietly. From Marcus. Remember him? One of our scholarship kids from Atlanta? Eleanor nodded. He's a teacher now, like he planned. And he started a writing program at his school based on the center. He's teaching 150 kids the philosophy Mrs. Hartwell taught me. Compete with yourself. Tell your truth. Show up every day. Michael pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. A classroom full of teenagers all writing in notebooks. On the board behind them, who was yesterday's version of you? How can you be better today? And it's not just Marcus, Michael continued. Aisha started a basketball program in Charlotte that teaches young players to compete with themselves. David opened a community center in Raleigh that serves meals and offers tutoring. At least 20 of our scholarship kids have gone on to start programs helping others. He looked at Eleanor with wonder. Your sandwiches didn't just save 1,000 kids, Mrs. Hartwell. They saved tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Because everyone you helped is helping others, and those people are helping others, and the chain just keeps growing. Jasmine squeezed Eleanor's hand. You're going to live forever, Mrs. Hartwell. Not your body, but your kindness. It's going to outlive all of us. Eleanor looked at these 2 people, one who'd been a scared boy in her classroom, one who'd been a homeless girl she'd never met, and felt the full weight of what her life had meant. For 42 years, she'd wondered if she mattered. Now she knew, not just that she mattered, but that her mattering would echo across generations, growing bigger and reaching further with each passing year. Can I tell you both something? Eleanor said softly. They nodded. I met a girl today at the center. Sophia, 9 years old, hungry, struggling. I made her a sandwich. Michael smiled. And I know. Eleanor's voice broke. I know that 40 years from now, Sophia might be standing somewhere telling someone about the day a stranger made her a sandwich and changed her life. And that person might help someone else. And the chain that started with my teacher, Mrs. Patricia Monroe, who saved me when I was 16, that chain will still be growing long after I'm gone. She looked at them both through tears. That's what I want you to remember. That's what I want every child who walks through the doors of that center to know. Your kindness doesn't end with you. It ripples out across time and touches lives you'll never meet. So be kind, be honest, show up, compete with yourself, and trust that it matters, even when you can't see proof. Jasmine wiped her eyes. I'll remember, Mrs. Hartwell. I promise. So will I, Michael said. I'll make sure everyone knows. Your story, Mrs. Monroe's story, Sophia's story, they're all part of the same chain. And we'll keep telling it so the chain never breaks. Eleanor hugged them both one more time. Then Rebecca arrived to drive her home. As they pulled away from the parking lot, Eleanor looked back at Michael and Jasmine, still standing together in the fading light. 2 lives she'd changed without knowing it. 2 people who would change thousands more. The chain would continue. The ripples would spread. Long after Eleanor was gone, children would eat sandwiches at the center bearing her name and learn that small acts of kindness can change the world. She leaned back in her seat and smiled through her tears. 47 years ago, she'd made sandwiches for a hungry boy. Today, that boy had changed the world. And tomorrow, the children he'd helped would change it again. Small acts, repeated with love across time, had built something eternal. And it would never, ever stop. When Michael Jordan walked into his old high school classroom after 35 years, his teacher, Eleanor Hartwell, couldn't believe her eyes. The greatest basketball player of all time was standing right there, in the same room where he once struggled as a skinny 15-year-old kid who'd just been cut from the varsity team. But Michael wasn't there to talk about basketball. He wasn't there to sign autographs or take pictures. He was there to say thank you for something his teacher did back in 1979 that she didn't even remember doing. Something so small, so simple, that she never thought twice about it. Michael walked up to her desk and placed a small wrapped box among her papers. "Don't open it until I leave," he said quietly. "But first, I need to tell you a story about why I'm really here." What could possibly be inside that mysterious box? Why did Michael Jordan travel all this way to see a teacher he hadn't spoken to in over 3 decades? And what did she do that was so important it changed not just his life, but the lives of thousands of children she'd never even met? The answer will shock you and might even make you cry. Because this isn't just a story about basketball or fame or success. It's a story about sandwiches, red ink, and how one small act of kindness can ripple across 40 years and change the world. Stay with us until the end to find out what was in that box and why it made a 67-year-old retired teacher break down in tears. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. This is the incredible true story of how Eleanor Hartwell discovered that her entire life's work wasn't wasted after all. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October 2019. Eleanor sat alone in room 207 of Laney High School in Wilmington, North Carolina, grading papers just like she'd done for the past 42 years. The fluorescent lights flickered above her head. Rain pounded against the windows, and she had no idea that in just a few minutes, everything she thought she knew about her life was about to change forever. So where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below. We'd love to hear from viewers all around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you're helping us spread these powerful messages of kindness to millions more people who need to hear them. Remember, just like Eleanor's sandwiches changed thousands of lives, your small act of sharing this video could inspire someone else to show kindness today. You never know whose life you might change. And don't go anywhere yet. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story that will remind you why kindness matters. Thank you for watching, and remember, small acts of kindness can change the world.